Welcome to the archives. Enjoy your stay. Today, I present you a true Reddit horror story. This happened 2 years ago, on the night of July 5th. I was only 13 at the time and agreed to go on a camping trip with my grandmother, aunt, and my 3 cousins. We were going to a campsite that my whole family stays at every year. Just my parents are usually busy with work, so my brother and I never got to go, but this year would be my first time. We pulled up to this tiny cabin. My cousin and I looked at each other, and she grinned. For protection purposes, I'm going to call my cousin a different name. Her name in this story will be Gracie. So Gracie and I got out of the car and walked up to the small-ass cabin that we rented. My grandmother handed me the key, and I unlocked the door and peeked in. It was a one-room cabin. There were 3 beds and a mini-fridge. One bed was a loft bed, and the other 2 were sticking out from beneath it. It was simple how the sleeping arrangements would work. My aunt and grandmother in one bed and Gracie's siblings in another, and the loft would be ours. So we needed hot dog buns, and my grandmother sent me and Gracie to go and purchase them from the store that was at the entrance of the campsite. We just nodded and went to go and get them. We walked to the store down the trail. When we entered, we were greeted by a man. I had a feeling something was off about this guy, but I couldn't put my finger on it. He had dark, greasy black hair, and his beard looked like it hadn't ever been washed. His teeth were corn yellow, and he was a bigger guy who reeked of body odor and onions. He asked what he could do for us and called us pretty. I didn't think much of it, because everyone called me and Gracie pretty. Not to be petty, but they did. So we just thanked him and asked where the buns were. He pointed over towards a shelf, and Gracie ran over to get them. We were paying, and that's when things started to get weird. He held onto my hand and asked where we would be staying. We never answered and booked it out of there. That night, it poured outside, and Gracie and I had to use the bathroom. We crawled down and asked if we could go. My grandmother agreed, and Gracie and I started walking, seeming how the cabin didn't have a bathroom. When we made it to the restroom, there were only 2 bathrooms, and one was for a male and the other a female. Gracie and I set our flashlights on the sink outside the stalls, and she took the female restroom, while I got stuck with the male. We both hurried and walked out to the sinks. We were washing our hands when we noticed our flashlights were missing. We stared at each other. We swore we had brought them, and now they were gone? Maybe we just imagined even bringing them. Gracie and I followed the trail of lanterns back to our cabin. When we entered, everyone was gone. I found a note stating they had left to my cousin's cabin to use the bathroom and to just go back to sleep. We climbed back up, but couldn't get comfortable. The mattress was lying at an odd angle. I pulled up the side and the flashlights were there. I know what you're thinking. You probably just forgot them. But why were they wet? And why was there a note? The note said, "You're very pretty." That's when it clicked. The man at the store must have had something to do with this. We heard tapping on the window and looked to see a big shadow of a man cupping his hands to the glass and looking in. My cousin and I slid against the wall on the side the window was on. Gracie whispered, "The door." My eyes grew. We didn't lock it, and if he got in here... I sighed and rushed down, not caring if he saw, and locked the door. He did see, and started to pound on the door. I swiftly crawled back up to the loft and held tight to Gracie. We thought we were going to die, but a few minutes later, it all stopped. I heard yelling coming from outside, and just a few minutes later my grandmother, my aunt, and 2 cousins showed up. They rushed inside and questioned what happened, and we left. I can't help but think what would have happened if I never locked that door.